Hey everybody, I wanted to do another crazy hard hat hair talk with y'all today and just talk about different screw types and screws that you will use in electrical. If you are getting into the trade and have no frame of reference for what electrical materials are, this might be helpful to you. So familiarizing yourself with different types of commonly used fasteners can really help you move a job along, mainly because you need to know like what you're installing and need to know what hardware you need to get that done. So I guess I'll start with smallest types of screws that you will most commonly see. So smallest is I guess there's a couple of ways I could break this up for you all, but one of the ways is just talking about the smallest and going to largest. So just to start off, there's different ways of categorizing a lot of fasteners, but the type that's most commonly used in electrical is talking about the thread pitch and I guess it's the size of the fastener, and then it's the thread pitch. So for instance, there's a 632 screw, which is the smallest one that you'll use, and that refers to that it's a number 6 type size of screw, and then that there is 32 threads per inch of fastener. So that denotes like the type of screw that it is. So they make things called tap kits, which allow you to thread holes into metal, or wood, I guess. I mean, you wouldn't really benefit from that, but into metal, and those will allow you to create a female thread to accept the fastener that you're trying to install. So a 632 screw, it's commonly used for attaching devices to electrical boxes. So for instance, a light switch, any kind of switch, so like a dimmer switch, like a motor, like little disconnect type of switch. Let's see, like a oven outlet, a normal receptacle, just any type of like device that's going to go into an electrical box. The screws that are going to fasten that to the little tabs on an electrical box are 632. So then there is 832, which is a number 8 screw. It's a little wider than a 632, so that's one way that you can personally visually tell the difference. So you have 632, 832, 1024, not as commonly used, 1032, quarter 20. They also make quarter 24, and then they also have bolts that go up from there, and those are but the most common bolts that you'll use is quarter inch hardware. So like you'll have quarter inch all thread, and if you don't know what all thread is just kind of like the name suggests, it's like a screw in 10-foot segments that we use to support conduit. So like you'll have a fastener that'll go into the roof or a top deck or whatever framing member you're trying to attach to. It could be wood, it could be metal, it could be concrete, and you go ahead and attach that, and then the all thread will spin right into it, and then you can secure it all with a nut and a lock washer, and you can go ahead and get that going. So that's all thread. So the common sizes for that are quarter inch, 3/8, and then half inch. And the different situations that you would find yourself using those things are mainly considerations about weight. So for instance, if you're just supporting one conduit if you just need to support one conduit and your electrical company considered that you would be doing that, they might buy a quarter inch all thread so that you can support it. If you have 3/8 all thread, that's the most common size that you'll use if you just need to support like a rack of like 10 pipes and it doesn't go very far, or there's like other, like it's not a run, you can probably use 3/8 all thread. If you are using, like, if you're putting big racks, like if you're working in a data center, or maybe if your rack is exclusively supported by all thread, if it's like in a warehouse and like there's nothing but open ceiling and you completely create the support for your conduits, then you might use 1/2 inch all thread. Also, if you're in like a bigger sort of contract, you might find yourself using 1/2 inch all thread, but in electrical. So if you are in those situations, you'll find yourself using those common all thread sizes. So going back to screws, another bolt size that you'll find relatively frequently is a 1/4 20 bolt. So people say 1/4 20. It's a 1/4 inch size bolt, like threads, like width of it, and then that there's 20 threads per inch of the screw. So that's a common screw that you'll use, and that is something that you'll use typically in conjunction with spring nuts. Spring nuts are basically like threaded washer, is how I would describe them to someone who hasn't seen that before. And those are great for basically supporting like boxes and like disconnects and equipment that is mounted to a wall. So like a panel as well is something that you could mount a piece of strut onto a wall, and then you could then get a 1/4 20 bolt, depending on, it could be in different lengths. It could be like a 2-inch 1/4 20, or it could be like a 1-inch 1/4 20, just depending on what you need to go and be long enough to go have the head of the screw, grabbing the box or pole can or panel, what have you, and then threads long enough to reach the face of the strut and then enter the spring nut. So that is another example of what a 1/4 20 would be used for. You can also use it if you are what else would you use 1/4? You can also, like, you might find yourself supporting just a bunch of different type of boxes. You might also consider there's certain like hardware that's also 1/4 20, so like you might have to spin off a few nuts from some studs that are sitting on a piece of equipment that are 1/4 20. It's not as common, but so that's 1/4 20. And then there are 5/16 bolts, and after that point, the thread pitch is typically dropped from the nomenclature for talking about the stuff. Like, oh, you have any 5/16 bolts, which is honestly a very uncommon size, but you do occasionally see it. But yeah, after that, you go up to 3/8 bolts, which is probably the most common size that you'll use. 3/8 hardware is the most common size in commercial work. It's just like a nice medium between like being a lighter weight material, but also providing strength. So it's like a nice medium between 1/2 inch all thread, which is more expensive, but is honestly overkill in a lot of scenarios, and then 1/4 inch all thread, which bends if a breeze hits it. So it's like a nice healthy, like good medium between the sizes that are typically available in larger or smaller. So that's 3/8 bolts, and then up from there, the most next common size that you'll have to deal with is 1/2 inch, and this kind of just goes hand in hand with what I was talking about with 1/2 inch all thread. 1/2 inch bolts are just like if you're mounting like much more heavy equipment, you might want to consider attaching it with 1/2 inch hardware because of the weight concerns. So one thing that does increase holding capacity is the width of the fastener. So like the strength, the sheer force that could break a 632 compared to the shearing force, like to break the head off the bolt, is is like much greater. Like you'd have to apply a lot more pressure to a 1/2 inch bolt to break it than you would with a 632, which you could probably bend with your lineman pliers, whereas like with a 1/2 inch bolt, you know, you need a bandsaw or a sawzall if you wanted to really not have a great time. So those are very common sizes. For all those bolt sizes, what is also common is using stuff called is like hardware for that. So that could either be lock washers or split washers, which are, I like calling them split washers to people who are new, because it's literally split in half. It's like a washer, but it's split, and it that particular piece of hardware is useful for going just under the head of a bolt, and then usually a washer is underneath it, a flat washer, and it just is a more sure connection to the thing that you're attaching it to. So it has, the reason that it's split is that it creates a sort of springing force that more securely can have the fastener sit into the thing that you're trying to thread it into. So if you slam on it with your impact until you get a couple clicks on your impact, or like let's say you're with a torque wrench and you're have the gear bussing attachment points, and you see like they have the cone flat washers, and some of them have split washers. You know, if you think about it, like when that split part, the one that has two ends sitting up at different heights, right? So as you turn the fastener more and bring the head closer to the material that you're trying to hold, it makes that split end depress and become flat. And so that springy tension that it is naturally like has from being that shape holds the fastener much tighter. So like it'd be much harder to break loose a fastener with a split washer on it than one without. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this, but I recently heard within the past few years, like around 2023, I was watching a NASA video about a project they were launching to space, and there was a vibration test that they had some satellite that they were planning on, or I think it was actually basically a big camera so that they could take pictures of various parts of space. And forgive me if I'm completely botching that project. It's a much more intensive, like high stakes, very costly mission that is probably costing billions of dollars to do. But anyways, they had to do a vibration test to see if this thing, when it's launching out of space, would hold up to the forces, you know, of literally flight. And like a lot of the thing fell apart. So they didn't use like nylon lock nuts or split washers on certain pieces of equipment, and that just completely, you know, went over the head of the crew that was working on it. So that just goes to show that, like, if you go and you install things, you know, over time, like worst case, let's say there's an earthquake, and that thing could come loose, and let's say it's supporting a bunch of pipes, you know, and there's someone walking underneath, you know, a catastrophe can happen. So what you want to do is to lock down everything that you do, so that when you walk away, and in 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 years, you know, that fastener is still going to be locked in place to the best that you can do. So a lot of the times, like if you're making a strut sandwich, some people call it, you'll have all thread going through the strut channel, then you'll have a nut on the top, you'll potentially have a square washer, which is a thicker washer. It's almost a 1/4 inch thick, and it allows it to sit on the top of the open end of strut sandwich. And so you'll have a nut. You'll run up a nut on the all thread, then you'll put a split washer, a flat washer, or a square washer, and then you'll have the strut, and then you'll have a flat washer, and then you'll have after that you can get away with just using one. That's actually the typical standard practice, is just using one. If you use two, it just makes it an absolute nightmare to try to disassemble if you ever needed to. So you'll burn through a lot more material if you do two. So it's pretty typical standard practice to do. If you're making a strut sandwich, to do nut, split washer, flat square washer, strut, flat washer, nut, and that's it. It's also much easier to level out if you do it that way, because the split washer is not it's not naturally level because it's split, so it's much easier to level out racks that way, by not having to take out the tension so that you can see how the thing is actually going to be sitting. So that's a very common practice that you will walk into is creating a bunch of strut sandwiches. So yeah, those are typical hardware pieces that you will use. So bolts, and then different types of washers. If I didn't explain it, if you didn't get that from that explanation, a flat washer is pretty much what it is. It's basically a flat metal donut, and it's got a hole in the middle, and they make them in different sizes. So for instance, the most common ones that you'll see, this is definitely not a complete list of things that are available on the market, but the most common ones that you'll see are 1/4-inch flat washers, meaning that, well, if someone says that, they're referring to the hole in the middle of the washer. So if they're saying a 1/4-inch flat washer, they're not going to be like, oh, I need a 1/4-inch by 1.5-inch flat washer. They'll probably just be like, do you have like the big ones, like the wider ones? Because they do make thinner ones that like aren't as wide. They're like I don't exactly know the exact measurement. They might be 1 inch or maybe a little less, but but this typical size you'll get, I think, is like 1.5 inches. Yeah, so it'll be like a 1/4-inch flat washer, and it's like 1.5 inches wide. And then you'll also have 3/8 flat washers. Again, it's a 3/8 by 1.5 inch flat washer. So again, the hole is 3/8 of an inch in the middle, and the total diameter of the flat washer sits around 1.5 inches. So then you also have 1/2 inch hardware or 1/2 inch flat washers, and the same goes for spring nuts. The same goes for block washers or split washers. Yeah, so if you have a fastener that is of a certain size, then you have the according hardware for all of that. So that can be flat washer, that could be split washer, that could be a nylon block nut if you're in a really fancy place. It could be spring nuts. It could be square washers. So if there's one of one type, then it also exists in the thing that receives on the other side. So those are some typical screw fasteners. I think I actually did skip the 832, 1032, and those uses. So I'm sorry about that. But just to retouch on that, 832s are typically used for lights. So if you are, let's say you are working on a 3.0 or a 4.0 mud ring, which is the fixture mud ring type, that's the name for it. If you are installing a light, that is the receiving plate that is the standardized affixing plate that has become standard for electrical product companies to adhere to for a standardized installation procedure, I guess is how you could call that. So like if you have a little light and you're in a commercial space, if you're not installing like a light that is just suspended, like an LED like strip light, or like a T8 or T12 style like lamp, and if it's like a normal 4S box and you have a mud ring, then the screw holes for that are going to be 832. So those are 832. Also on 4S boxes and 411 boxes, the most commonly used electrical box in commercial, the screws that fix the mud ring or blank cover to that 4S or 411 box, those are either 8 or 1032 screws. I've seen both. I feel like for by and large it is 832, but just so you know, it can also be 1032. So those sizes are common as well. So you will see those very commonly. Another thing that also can be 832 or 1032 is ground screws. So a very common thing in electrical, if you're just starting out and you don't know, is that in the past we were able to just run a hot and a neutral to something, and that was pretty much it. You didn't need another wire. But I think the code was basically born around like the 70s is when it sort of started to take off and become standard as requiring to bond boxes. So like if you have a metal enclosure, in today's world, not to go too deep into this because this could be a whole topic, that you need to ground a box. So what that looks like is you'll have a ground screw, and the box that you're installing typically will have an already threaded hole to receive a ground screw. It'll usually be raised off the back wall of the box, and you'll see it as a kind of noticeable inverted dimple, and then you see a little hole for a screw, and that's where you can go ahead and insert your green ground screw, and then wrapped around it, typically you'll have a pigtail that's either created for you or you make your own out of, like, if you just buy a bunch of green ground screws, then you can go ahead and like prefab your own and like cut it out of some MC and wrap a green ground pigtail around that screw and go ahead and do that. So that can be an 832 or it can be a 1032. So that's another size of thing that you will be needing to know. So ground screws can be 832, they can be 1032. So I keep a tap kit on me that allows me to thread those hole sizes. If you install, like if you as an electrician, you're going to need a tap kit to either, for one, secure ground bars to junction boxes. That is something that is very commonly done. A lot of people will just use a self-tapper, but code actually does not permit that. It literally has a code that talks about not using sharp-ended screws. All of the screws that are to be in electrical boxes are to be of a blunt type. So having a tap kit is something that allows you to adhere to that code. So having a tap kit, an electrician's tap kit, is very necessary. So anything that it'll go typical sizes that you can get and buy as a kit from Greenlee and Milwaukee and Klein and Ideal are a 632 up to like a quarter 20 usually. Tap kit is what you'll see. After that, you'd probably your stuff would start snapping. Your bits would start snapping. So so those are typical fastener types that you will see as bolt like hardware, like blunt end fasteners. I could do a whole other thing about other types of screws, and I will keep that for another video because this is a long video already talking about a very simple topic. So I will catch you all in the next one. Maybe we'll talk about other fasteners that you use like in the next one. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Appreciate it. See ya.